Flint Jackson never expected to save a stranger's life on a rainy Tuesday, but he also never expected that stranger to flip his world upside down. The crash happened fast. 1 second, he was buckling his 6-year-old son Silas into the booster seat of their beat-up pickup in the grocery store parking lot, and the next, a sleek black sports car barreled across the slick pavement and slammed into a tree across the street. The engine hissed. Smoke curled upward. "Stay in the truck," Flint barked at Silas as he threw open the door and sprinted across the lot, dodging traffic. His boots hit the pavement hard, rain soaking through his flannel shirt. The car was twisted metal and shattered glass. The driver's side door was jammed shut. He peered in through the broken window. A woman, her head was slumped forward, her breathing shallow. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead. Hey, can you hear me?" he shouted, yanking at the door handle. She stirred barely. "I can't move." "You don't have to, I've got you." Flint braced himself and, with a grunt, wrenched the door open. Metal screamed. He reached in, unbuckling her seatbelt with one hand and supporting her with the other. She was light, too light, and her skin was freezing. He carried her out just as the engine let out a sharp pop and smoke thickened. Sirens wailed in the distance. She blinked up at him through the rain. "You're not a paramedic." "Nope," he said, tightening his hold as he moved her away from the wreckage. "Name's Flint. I fix roofs and raise a kid." She gave a weak sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Nola Merritt." He looked down at her soaked blouse, designer heels, and delicate gold earrings. "Not from around here." "Hang tight, Nola. Help's on the way." Flint hadn't planned on seeing her again. But 3 days later, after dropping Silas at school and heading to the hardware store, he found Nola standing in front of his truck cleaned up, in a ridiculously expensive coat, her dark hair pulled back in a loose twist. "I asked around. This was the only Flint in town," she said, tilting her head at him. He stopped short. "You tracked me down." "I owed you a thank you, and maybe a coffee, or 10. "I'm not the kind of guy you need to thank with coffee," he said, wary. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, you didn't," she said simply. "Most people would have stood there recording it on their phones." He didn't know what to say to that, so he scratched the back of his neck. "You look better." "Thanks to you," she hesitated, then smiled. "I'm also incredibly lost. Literally. I don't know this town at all, and my rental car's GPS isn't working. Can I buy you that coffee and ask for directions?" He found himself nodding before he could think better of it. The coffee shop was warm, small, and smelled like cinnamon. Nola ordered a cappuccino. Flint ordered black coffee and kept glancing at the clock. "You always this jumpy?" she asked, sipping hers. "Just on a schedule. Gotta pick up Silas in an hour. He's 6. Smart kid, loves dinosaurs." She lit up. "I love kids." He arched a brow. "You have any?" "No, just me. Travel a lot. Work keeps me busy." "What kind of work?" There was a flicker in her eyes' hesitation. "Public relations," she said finally. "Corporate stuff, it's boring." He didn't push it. "Well, thanks for the coffee. I should." "Wait," she blurted, then flushed. "Would it be weird if I asked to see you again? I'm not staying long, maybe a week before I head back to the city. But I don't know, something about you." Flint stared at her. He hadn't been on a date in years. Not since Silas's mom left right after he was born. Since then, it was work, daycare pickups, and trying to keep the electricity on. But Nola looked at him like he wasn't just a guy with calloused hands and tired eyes, like she saw something more. "I don't know what I'd show you around here," he said slowly. "It's not exactly a tourist town." She smiled. "I'm not looking for tourist spots. I just want real things, real people." He met her eyes for a long second. Then, against all logic, he said, "All right, Tomorrow, I'll show you the best pie this side of the state. The next few days felt like they belonged to someone else's life. They walked through farmers' markets, shared hot cider, and laughed more than Flint remembered laughing in years. Nola didn't flinch at grease under his nails or the fact that his truck backfired every other day. She asked questions about Sila's, about his work, about his dreams like they mattered. And Flint, against every instinct, let himself start to want her. One night, after dropping Sila's off with his neighbor for a sleepover, he took her to a hilltop outside town. "Used to come up here when things got hard," he said, hands in his pockets. "Didn't fix anything, but it helped me breathe." "The stars are beautiful," she whispered beside him. He turned, "So are you." She looked up at him then, eyes soft. "Feel like I've known you longer than a week." "Me too." He kissed her, slow, careful. Her hands slid into his jacket, and for the first time in years, Flint wasn't thinking about bills or broken water heaters, he was just thinking about her. The next morning changed everything. He was fixing a gutter on a house when a glossy black SUV pulled up. Two men in suits stepped out. "Are you Mr. Jackson?" He climbed down the ladder, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yes, what's this about?" "We work for Merritt Holdings, MS. Nola Merritt asked us to deliver this." One of them handed him a sleek folder. He opened it. Inside was a document outlining a full scholarship for Sila's to attend one of the best private schools in the state. Paid in full. Plus a check for $50,000 labeled as a thank you gift. Flint's stomach dropped. Merritt Holdings. The name was familiar, too familiar. "You're telling me she's..." MS. Merritt is the majority shareholder of Merritt Holdings. Estimated net worth. "I don't care about that," Flint snapped, slamming the folder shut. He didn't know what made him feel sicker, the fact that she'd kept it from him, or the fact that he'd let himself fall for someone so far out of his world. That night, she knocked on his front door. He opened it but didn't step aside. She looked wrecked. "I didn't want you to find out like that." "You lied." "I didn't, I just didn't tell you everything. I wanted to be Nola with you, not Merritt Holdings, not the billionaire with a private jet. Just me." "And what, you were gonna slip me a check and disappear?" "No," she said, eyes filling. "That's not what this was. I love you, Flint." His breath caught. "I didn't mean to, didn't plan it, but I do." He stared at her, torn between fury and something deeper. "Don't make this about money," she said, her voice cracking. "This isn't about that, it's about us. And maybe it's crazy, but I've never felt this way before. Not once." Sila's peeked from behind the couch, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, is that Nola?" Flint looked at his son, then back at her. And something cracked open. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "We've got a lot to talk about." Flint stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed as Nola hovered near the doorway, her coat still damp from the rain. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock above the stove. "You didn't have to show up with contracts and money," he said finally, his voice low. "You could have picked up the phone or just come by." "I didn't send them to impress you," she said, setting her bag on the floor. "I sent them because I wanted to help Sila's. I thought." "Without asking, without even talking to me first," he shook his head. "I don't need your money, Nola." "I know you don't. That's not why she stopped, exhaling. "Look," I panicked. "I've never been in something real before, not like this. I didn't know how to handle it." Flint ran a hand through his hair. "You say it's real, but you didn't trust me with the truth. You let me walk around thinking you were just passing through." "I was, until I met you." He looked at her, tired, guarded. "So what now? You fly back to whatever tower you live in, and we go back to pretending this week didn't happen. I'm not going anywhere, she said, not unless you tell me to. Across the room, Silas tugged at the strap of his backpack. He looked between them, eyes wide. Are you mad at her? Flint crouched down beside him. No, bud, just trying to figure stuff out. Silas tilted his head. She makes your face look different, happier. Flint's throat tightened. He looked up at Nola, and for a moment neither of them said a word. I should go, she whispered. I didn't come here to make things worse. Flint stood. No, you came to fix something. That counts for something. She blinked, surprised. Then, can we talk? He nodded once, after Silas goes to bed. Later that night, after the house had quieted and Silas was asleep, they sat on the worn couch in the living room. The lamp cast a soft glow across the room, highlighting the faded seams of the cushions and the worry lines on Flint's face. Why didn't you just say who you were? He asked, staring at the floorboards. I tried, she said. Twice, but you'd already made it clear you don't think much of people with money. I didn't want to be dismissed before I even had a chance. You think I'd do that? I think you've spent a long time trying to protect yourself and your son. He glanced at her. You're not wrong. She sat forward, elbows on her knees. I grew up around people who think money solves everything. It doesn't, it just hides things better. I didn't want to be that person with you. You're not, he said carefully, but you made a choice for both of us. That's hard to get past. I know, she said, but I want to be better, with you, for you. He looked at her for a long time. You're not the only one who's scared, Nola. She gave a slow nod. Tell me what you need. He stood abruptly, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet road. I need to know this thing between us isn't just some escape for you, that it's not going to disappear the second you're bored or busy. I'm not going anywhere. I've heard that before, he said, his voice tighter now. And I've got a 6-year-old who asks me every week why his mom never calls. Nola stood, walked slowly to him. I'm not her. No, you're not, he said, turning to face her. But you've got a life I can't even imagine. You've got people in suits who show up with folders and checks. You've got a world that doesn't make space for guys like me. I don't want that world if it means losing you. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My board is expecting me back in the city next week, but told them I'm extending my stay. Indefinitely. He took the paper, scanned it. It was a resignation letter, a draft of one at least. I've been doing that job for a decade, she said, and I've never felt as alive as I did the past 7 days. Flint folded it carefully, set it on the table. That's a big decision to make over coffee and county fairs. She smiled faintly. It wasn't the pie or the cider, Flint, it was you. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't demand answers but waited patiently for them. I can't promise you anything fancy, he said eventually. I can't give you a jet or a house with a view, but I can be honest. I can show up every day. That's all I want. He stepped closer. And if this works, it's going to be messy. I've got baggage. I've got bills. I've got a kid who needs stability. I'm not afraid of messy, she said. I'm afraid of empty. He touched her cheek gently. You're not just passing through anymore, are you? No, she said, pressing her forehead to his. I'm exactly where I want to be. He kissed her again, deeper this time, the kind of kiss that tasted like hope and second chances. When they finally pulled apart, she reached for his hand. Come with me tomorrow, she said. There's something I want to show you. What is it? You'll see. The next morning, she drove them past the edge of town in a sleek black SUV that looked wildly out of place on the gravel roads. Silas was at school, and the world was quiet in that golden hour between sunrise and bustle. She pulled off near a piece of land bordered by tall oaks and open sky. Flint stepped out, confused. What is this? I bought it yesterday, she said, sliding her sunglasses up. Called a local agent. It's 20 acres. Needs work, but the soil's good. I thought maybe we could build something here. He stared at her, stunned. A house, he asked. A home, she said, for all of us if you want. His voice was quiet. Why would you do that? Because I'm not trying to fit you into my life, Flint. I want to build one with you. He looked out at the land, then back at her, emotion rising in his throat. I don't have the words for this, he whispered. You don't need words, she said, taking his hand. Just say yes. Flint adjusted the strap of his tool belt as he stepped out of the SUV and looked around the land again. The morning sun had crept higher, catching the frost-dusted grass and the tops of the trees like gold leaf. He still wasn't entirely sure this was real. You bought it just like that? He asked, turning toward Nola. I made an offer that couldn't be refused, she said. The owner's daughter wants to move west. He was ready to let it go. I thought you were staying longer, not planting roots. I don't do things halfway, Flint. He studied her face, the way her gaze stayed steady despite the wind lifting her hair. This isn't just about me and Sela's, is it? No, she said. It's about me. I've spent years building someone else's legacy. I want to start living mine. He turned back toward the open field, the long stretch of potential. You know this place needs everything. Power, septic, permits, fencing. It's not a weekend project. I know, that's why I didn't come here with blueprints or dreams drawn in the sky. I came to ask if you'd help me build it, not just the house, the life. Flint's pulse kicked harder. You're not used to asking for help. No, she admitted. I'm used to giving orders and writing checks, but none of that means anything if I'm doing it alone. He looked down at her hand, resting against her coat pocket like she wasn't sure whether to reach for him. I spent so long thinking I had to be 10 steps ahead of everything, she continued. That if I controlled enough, planned enough, I wouldn't get hurt again. But with you, I don't want control. I just want honesty. Flint nodded slowly and slid a hand into hers. Then let's not rush. Let's see what grows here. She exhaled, visibly relieved. I don't need a timeline, just a direction. They stood there for a while longer, the wind tangling around them, and for the first time in years, Flint didn't feel like he was bracing for the next thing to go wrong. Afterward, they drove back into town. Nola dropped him off at the hardware store and promised to pick up Sela's from school so he could finish the roofing job he'd taken on. When she pulled away, he didn't miss the way she looked in the rearview mirror, like she was checking to make sure he was still there. Later that evening, Flint unlocked the front door and stepped inside to the sound of laughter. Sela's was sprawled on the living room rug surrounded by scattered Lego bricks, and Nola sat cross-legged beside him, her heels abandoned by the door. She changed into jeans and a faded sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. I told him you used to fix water towers, she said, glancing up. He thinks you're a superhero now. I didn't say superhero, Sela's corrected, holding up a tiny plastic figure. I said engineer ninja. Flint raised an eyebrow. That's a promotion. Dinner's warming in the oven, Nola said, and I didn't burn anything. I swear. He walked into the kitchen, opened the oven, and blinked. Is that lasagna? Don't look so surprised. I know my way around a recipe when I don't have a conference call every 20 minutes. He leaned against the counter, watching her. You're different here. Maybe it was always like this underneath, just buried under deadlines and board reports. Sela's appeared beside them, holding up a drawing. I made our house. The sketch was uneven and colorful, with 3 stick figures in front of a big rectangle surrounded by trees. Who's that? Flint asked, pointing to the tallest one. Me, Sela said proudly, And that's you, and that's Nola. Nola knelt beside him. You gave me a cape. You're part of the team now, he said, like it was obvious. Flint felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain, not fear, just the ache of something real settling in. After Silas went to bed, Nola curled up beside Flint on the couch, her feet tucked beneath her. You ever think about what you'd be doing if Silas's mom hadn't left? She asked quietly. He considered it. Not really. I don't know who I'd be without him. I got my act together because I had to. He saved me more than I saved him. She studied him. You ever think you might deserve more than just surviving? I used to think wanting more was selfish, but lately... She reached up and brushed her fingers along his jaw. Lately, I've been wondering if I've been surviving so long, I forgot how to live. She leaned in, her voice low. Then let me help you remember. He kissed her, slower than before, like he was letting himself believe this could be more than borrowed time. Her hands curled around his collar, and for a while, the world narrowed to the warmth between them. The next morning, Flint stood outside the elementary school waiting for Silas. The air smelled like wood smoke and coming snow. He heard the crunch of boots before he saw her. Nola joined him at the fence, holding 2 coffees. I got yours right this time, she said, handing him the cup. No sugar. You learn fast. I had to. I've got a 6-year-old boss who expects excellence. They watched as Silas came out of the building, his backpack bouncing. He spotted them and ran full tilt into Flint's arms. Can Nola come to the winter festival with us? He asked, breathless. There's gonna be a petting zoo and hot chocolate and a band. Nola looked to Flint. Only if I'm invited. Flint glanced down at his son, who nodded with full-body enthusiasm. Looks like you're officially on the guest list. That weekend, they went to the festival. Silas rode a pony while Nola cheered him on, laughing when her scarf nearly blew into the cotton candy stand. They danced under string lights to a local band, and when the first snowflakes started to fall, Flint pulled Nola close as if she belonged there. Because she did. And he was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time he hadn't found something temporary. He'd found something he could build forever on. Snow clung to the edge of the porch roof, melting into slow drips that tapped rhythmically against the railing. Flint tightened the last bolt on the mailbox post they'd installed at the edge of the property. It was a small thing, but something about it felt permanent, like it meant this land wasn't just a piece of earth anymore. It was becoming theirs. Behind him, Nola trudged through the snow in boots and a wool coat, holding a thermos in one hand and a folded paper in the other. She stopped beside him, handed over the thermos, and tapped the paper. Silas made me sign this, she said. He says no one's allowed to live here unless they agree to 3 rules. Flint raised an eyebrow as he unscrewed the thermos lid. I'm almost scared to ask. Rule 1, you have to like pancakes, she said, unfolding it. Rule 2, you have to be okay with pillow forts on Saturdays. Rule 3, you can't leave unless everyone agrees it's okay. Flint shook his head, a rare laugh catching in his throat. He's got a good lawyer's instinct. He's got a big heart. I think he's just trying to protect it. She looked up at the sky, where clouds gathered in soft layers. I get it. Flint glanced at her. What do you mean? I used to pack a suitcase every Sunday night, always had someplace to go. A meeting, a launch, a press event. But lately, Sunday nights feel different, like I don't have to go anywhere anymore. He took a slow sip of coffee, letting the warmth sink in. You're saying this is home now. I'm saying I don't want to be anywhere else. Nola looked back at the house in progress, a shell of what it would become, but even now, the bones of a life were forming. The frame stood tall, windows yet to be installed, but the shape of it was unmistakable. I've been thinking about the upstairs, she said. We could make the corner room Silas's. he'll get the sunrise. And the best window for sneaking out when he's 16, Flint replied. We'll put in an alarm system, she said, touching his arm, and maybe a swing set, a garden, room for a dog if he ever wants one. Flint looked at her and something in his chest settled. She wasn't just dreaming anymore, she was planning. For them, with them. Later that evening, after Silas had fallen asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, Flint carried him to his room while Nola quietly folded the laundry they'd left in the basket 2 days ago. The house was warm, filled with the scent of wood polish, and something she'd baked earlier, an apple crumble that had turned out surprisingly well, considering she'd never used a hand mixer before. When Flint returned, he leaned in the doorway, watching her match socks with the kind of focus she usually reserved for financial analysis. You always do things with this much precision, he asked. She looked up, smiled. Old habits. I used to believe perfection was the only way to keep things from falling apart. He walked over and took the laundry from her hands, setting it aside. They still fell apart, didn't they? Eventually, she said. Turns out perfection doesn't keep people around, but honesty might. He sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. You're not trying to impress me anymore, are you? No, she said. I don't want to impress you. I want to belong with you. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Before you say anything, he said, I know it's fast. I know we've only had a few weeks, but I also know I've never trusted anyone with my kid, my home, or my heart the way I trust you. She stared at the box, then at him. You're serious? I'm not asking for a wedding next month. I'm asking for a promise. That we'll build this together, that we'll fight for this even when it's hard. He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, nothing flashy, just a single diamond nestled in a band of brushed gold. I sold the old motorcycle I'd been fixing up, he said quietly. Didn't need it anymore. This felt more important. Nola looked down at the ring, then back at him, her eyes glassy. You really think we can make this work? She whispered. I don't just think it, he said. I know it. She took the ring, slid it on her finger, and nodded. Then yes. Flint let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain. The next morning, they drove to the building site together. As they pulled up, Flint noticed a silver truck parked near the property line. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, middle-aged, with a clipboard in hand. That's the guy from the county, Nola said. He's here about the permits. Flint stepped out first, holding out a hand. Flint Jackson. The man shook it. Heard you're putting up a family place here. That's right. Good, we need more families around here who stick. Nola joined them, and as the man turned to her, his eyebrows lifted. You're the investor. Not exactly, she said. I'm the fiancé. He laughed, scribbled something on his clipboard. Well, congratulations. I'll get these papers filed. You'll be hearing from us soon. They stood there watching him drive away, the wind curling around their coats. Feels official now, Flint said. Nola glanced at the ring on her hand. It already was. By mid-afternoon, they'd met with a contractor, chosen siding samples, and discussed insulation options. The decisions came quickly, but easily. They spoke in rhythm now, each suggestion met with real consideration, every compromise made with shared goals in mind. That evening, Silas came home with a handmade card from school. It was a drawing of their house, more detailed than the last, with a note scribbled in shaky block letters at the bottom. I'm glad you didn't crash and go away. Nola blinked fast, holding it against her chest. Flint crouched beside Silas. She's staying, buddy. Silas looked between them. Forever. Nola reached out, pulling him into a hug. Forever and ever. The days that followed passed in a flurry of progress. The house took shape, walls rising, windows fitted. They planted the first tree in oak, strong and stubborn, as a marker of the life growing from the soil of their second chance. One evening, as the sky turned lavender and the first stars blinked awake, Flint took Nola's hand and led her to the edge of the porch they'd just finished laying. "Stand here," he said. She obeyed, looking puzzled. He stepped behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "This is what I imagined," he said. "Right here, you, me, him, this view, coming home to something that doesn't feel like waiting anymore." Nola reached up, threading her fingers through his. "You saved me," she whispered. "That night, but even more after, every day since." "I didn't save you. I think we found each other." She turned in his arms, kissed him softly, and smiled. "Then let's never lose it." They stood there in the fading light, the future stretching out in front of them, not perfect, but honest. Built on trust, stitched together with second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't fade when the storm passes. It only grows stronger. A spring wind carried the scent of damp earth and pine through the open windows of the nearly finished house. The roof was on, the walls were painted, and the hardwood floors had just been sealed. Flint had done most of it with his own hands, every nail and board laid with quiet intention. Nola stood in what would soon be their kitchen, barefoot and holding a roll of painter's tape, looking at the empty space above the sink. "I was thinking open shelving," she said, turning as Flint entered behind her, dust on his jeans. "I figured you'd vote for something modern," he replied, glancing up at the bare wall. "But it makes sense. You like to see where everything is." "I like knowing what I'm working with," she said, setting the tape down. "In kitchens and in life." He crossed the room and rested a hand on her lower back. "You think you've got me all figured out then?" "Not even close," she said, "but I'm not in a rush anymore." They stood there for a quiet moment. Outside, Silas's laughter echoed from the yard, where he was helping their neighbor's daughter build a fort out of spare planks and branches. Mrs. Carter, who lived 2 doors down, had offered to keep an eye on them while Nola and Flint went over the final walkthrough with the contractor. "You realize," Nola said, "we've been living in a rental with no dishwasher and a leaky faucet for almost 4 months, and I haven't once missed the penthouse." "You missed the espresso machine." She laughed. "All right, I miss that, but not the view, not the silence, not the elevator that smelled like bleach and pretension." Flint leaned against the counter. "You ever talk to them again?" She knew what he meant: her board, her former colleagues, the world she'd once ruled from behind tinted glass and cold conference tables. "I did," she said. "They offered me a consulting contract, big money, flexible hours. I turned it down." He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect that." "I thought I might. But then I looked around and realized I'd be back where I started, on the outside of my own life, watching it happen. I'd rather be here, with paint on my hands and a boy who thinks I'm a superhero, because I remembered to pack extra apple slices in his lunchbox." Flint's eyes softened. "He keeps asking when we're moving in." "Next weekend. Contractor said the final inspection's Friday. We'll be home by Saturday." She stepped closer to him, "And I was thinking, maybe we don't wait on the wedding." He tilted his head. "You mean move it up?" "I mean, let's not waste time trying to make it perfect. Let's just make it ours, something simple, honest." A slow grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You proposing to me now?" "I'm proposing we stop waiting for the right moment." He stepped forward until there was only an inch between them. "Then let's do it." The following Saturday, under a blooming dogwood tree on the edge of their new land, Flint and Nola stood with Silas between them as Mrs. Carter, who'd once been a notary and still kept her license, read the vows they'd written that morning on the back of a hardware receipt. Silas held the rings in a small wooden box he'd painted himself, and when he handed them over, he whispered, You both look like magic." Flint's hand trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, a partner, a future." Nola looked up at him, her voice steady despite the tears threatening. "You gave me all of that when you pulled me out of that car. You didn't just save my life, you gave it back to me." Mrs. Carter wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "By the power vested in me by the great state of Tennessee and a lifetime of nosy matchmaking, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Silas cheered, loud enough to scare the birds from the trees. They kissed under the dogwood blossoms, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the rich, quiet promise of everything they had yet to build. That evening, they sat on the back porch of their new home. The first meal in their kitchen had been grilled cheese and tomato soup, eaten cross-legged on the floor while Silas made up songs about pickles and superheroes. Now he lay sleeping inside, his latest drawing pinned proudly to the refrigerator. Nola leaned into Flint's side, her head resting against his shoulder. "You know, I used to believe love was something that only worked if every box was checked: timing, background, expectations. But this is nothing like I imagined." He traced lazy circles on her arm. "Better or worse?" "Better because it's real." They sat in silence, watching the fireflies blink across the field. "I was scared," she said softly, "not of loving you, but of not knowing how to be someone worth staying for." "You never had to earn that," he replied. "You just had to be here." She turned toward him. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know," he said, and this time he believed it without doubt. Weeks passed. The garden began to sprout. Silas convinced them to adopt a scruffy mutt from the shelter, and they named him Pickle. Flint's business picked up clients liked that he'd built his own home with his own hands. Nola started a small consulting firm out of their home office, but only took on projects that excited her. She wrote in the mornings, baked in the afternoons, and went to every school play and weekend fair. Their life wasn't perfect. The sink clogged. The dog dug up the roses. Flint forgot their anniversary once and slept on the couch for a night. But it was theirs, built from scraped knuckles, hard truths, and a love that didn't need grand declarations to be felt. One evening, long after Silas had gone to bed and the fire had burned low, Nola curled into Flint's side and whispered, "I'm pregnant." He froze, heart thudding. She looked up at him with a nervous smile. "I didn't plan it, but I'm not scared." A long silence stretched between them before he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Neither am I." They lay there together, the past behind them, the future ahead, and nothing but open sky above. And in the quiet heart of their home, love honest and steady kept growing.